And we'll get started. Today, we're going to be talking about AI-powered access, and I am Carrie Lane. I am going to be presenting today. I'm an EdTech project specialist with the San Diego County Office of Education. Before starting at SDCOE, I taught third grade and middle school English for 6 years. And I am really passionate about assistive technology and accessibility as a whole. I went back and earned an assistive technology certification so that I could focus a lot of the ed tech work that we do on assistive technology. And here with me today, I have my co-host, Pam Rabin. She is going to be on the chat sharing resources and there to answer any questions. And she was teaching today, so her voice is out of commission. So she may just be sharing and answering questions in the chat, but she's here as a resource as well. And she is our AI guru. So if you have specific AI related questions, feel free to put them in the chat too. And she's really great. All right, on your slides, which we shared in the chat, we have a link to my email. If you have any questions about accessibility and or AI, you can always feel free to contact me. We have the link to today's resources, and in there we also have our upcoming EdTech sessions and resources list. This is our calendar of upcoming events. And so I want to show you this because as we record these sessions and finish them up, we always put the resources on this page. I'll share it in the chat as well. So this is where you can go if you want the recordings and the slides from any of our previous sessions, and where you can go to sign up for our future sessions. So for the rest of November, we have a really special update session about our Learning and Innovation Summit, where people are going to share some of the things that they've implemented in their classrooms that have attended our Innovation Summit in August. And then moving into December, we have our Back to Basics, which is about Google Forms and Google Sheets. We have a special Curious About Avid session, and then we move into our EdTech for Littles and AI in the classrooms, productivity for teachers. So a lot of good sessions coming up. Feel free to register for any of those. And let's start. So today we are going to talk about what AI can do in the classroom to support you as you support your learners, and then considerations for utilizing AI to support teaching. And we'll look at specific tools as well as just options for finding AI in general. So we are going to look at some tools. That doesn't mean there are so many AIs out there that you can find tons and tons of different tools that work with your district's privacy settings and, just make sure that your districts are allowing these AI tools before you use them. But whatever suits your need, you can kind of still use a lot of the strategies we're going to talk about, and the AI can change, but we'll just look at a few different options. Also, we always recommend if you have students who have IEPs or 504s, you check in with specialists and the student family before utilizing AI or any other kind of tech tools. And as I mentioned before, it's really important to check in with your district about what they are allowing you to use for AI and if they're allowing you to use AI. All right, so some of you mentioned that you have experience with AI, and many of you, even if you don't think you have, probably have used AI in the past or seen AI in the past in the form of predictive AI, where it looks at your patterns. For example, if you use Netflix and you notice that it recommends movies for you, the reason it does that is because it looks at your preferences and it looks at patterns and it recommends based on patterns. And so there are a lot of tools we use in education that use pattern-based or predictive AI. The more recent one that started a couple of years ago is generative AI, which is systems of artificial intelligence that create new content. So new text, new images, audio, and video. And they are also trained on data sets of information. So they pick up on patterns and algorithms, and then they output new information in different forms. Now, when you're thinking about accessibility, this can play a really big role because part of what we do when we're looking at how to meet the needs of our different learners is we think about ways that we can adjust the teaching styles or the teaching strategies to meet the needs of what we're doing. And so with that, AI gives us a really interesting opportunity to create and generate new content for different learners and their needs in seconds, which is really cool. And accessibility overall is the quality of being easily used, entered, or reached by people with disabilities. And this can relate to products, devices, services, curricula, or environments. And so as we're thinking about our curriculum, AI can be that tool for us that can make the quality of our content easily used and reached by people with different disabilities, physical, learning, cognitive. And these are just some statistics. I won't spend too much time on it, but information about students with disabilities. So 15% of public school students received special education related services in 2021 and 2022. And 78% of schools reported difficulty in hiring special education staff. What is interesting with AI is there are a lot of repositories there that now focus on information that we can use, whether you are a special education staff or just a general education staff member who's looking to really incorporate best strategies. Now there are AI tools that can give you information, chatbots that focus on information about specific disabilities that can help you out. So while it's still a huge problem that we have difficulty hiring special education staff, there is something that we can do with AI to support our teachers as they support students. Okay. So the first thing that I think would be really useful for AI is the looking at data for early intervention. And many of you are probably already doing this in your classroom if you have any kind of learning platforms that are collecting student data and they're doing assessments, they are reading different things, and then the platform is looking at that and adjusting or tailoring the learning paths accordingly. So there are lots of programs out there that might be, something that you're already using. Some examples would be Freckle, if you use Freckle Math, ST Math, Khan Academy. If you're familiar with the SATs, they use that same learning path and AI. Star Assessments use it. So do any of these look familiar to any of you? Any of you, you can put your thumb up or shake your head. Yeah. Did it ever occur to you that they were using AI? Yeah, some of you said yes, some of you not as much. So they are using the form of predictive AI to really look at what the students are answering and then to adjust the difficulty or the learning path accordingly. And so one example of this that I want to show you is Khan Academy. And again, there are so many out there. I'm just going to show you this one to give you an idea of how it is using this learning path technology with AI. But you can find it in many different ones. The other thing with this Khan Academy, Khanmigo, also has a lot of different AI tools that you can use in your classroom. So this is also just kind of a nice little AI tool that you can use. This is more of that generative, but in terms of the pathways, you can select a grade. And then what you can do is you start your students on a specific unit. And here it says ready to practice. Let's go. And then it's really just any type of assessment you might give students on the computer. And I'm just going to give an example. So use the image to fill in the blank. There are 7 groups of 5. So there are, and we'll do 35 in all. Check. It tells me I answered it well. Excellent. We'll move on to the next question. Now here, instead, I'm going to put the wrong answer just to demo this. And when I check it, it says not quite yet, give it another try, show a step so you can get information. But now if my student hits skip, They can show the solution and move on. Next question, we'll do 9 groups of 3, 27. They get it right. We'll move on to the last question, and they're going to do, we'll just say 6 groups of 3, and there are 25 in all. Check, it's wrong. If I skip this again, so now my students have skipped 2 of the questions, I get my summary, which is really important data, but it also changes the pathway. So it says, keep on practicing and you'll level up in no time. So instead of sending kids to the next thing, it's actually giving them up next and they have to move on to more instruction. And so this is a good example of the way that we can use data and predictive AI to create our learning paths for our students. And I see a comment in the chat, we've integrated this into Canvas, teachers enjoy having it there. So you've integrated Khanmigo or Khan Academy into it, Matt? Khanmigo, yeah. And Khanmigo does have quite a few other types of generative AI tools and things like that. There's a lot that you can use Khanmigo for. This is one example just for the data. The other thing with Canvas, if you are using Canvas as a school, is it has mastery paths itself. So you can actually do something similar with Canvas where it uses learning paths to guide your students through information. Anyone else want to share anything that they currently are using that they think might be using these learning paths and data?
I did see in the news that there are like a school that's actually they have like no teachers actually, and they just have kids on the program. And I think even at that school, I think they use eye tracking just to make sure like the kids are actually like on the program. That's what my familiarity with Canmigo.
Yeah, so there are some schools, I think there are just a couple that are fully using it, but there are a lot of schools that are starting to incorporate it pretty well into it, and some of them do use eye tracking. And it's really interesting. I don't know, as educators, there are the elements of that being a little bit scary, but it does offer some interesting possibilities where if there are educators side by side with something like that, think of all the extra time that you can focus on personalizing the learnings for your students who need it. So if it's no teachers, it's a little scary, but I do think that there are some of these things could be extra kind of pathways that we can use to supplement then pulling out students who need that extra reinforcement. Awesome. All right, so let's move on to personalization and AI. And I think that this is one of the most interesting portions of what AI can do because you can use AI to tailor your educational content to your students' needs. And we talked before, for those of you who've been to other sessions, about teaching to the middle and the idea that a lot of us are taught as teachers that it's best to teach to the middle, which then leaves our learners who are really struggling and our learners who are moving too fast or faster than we are to kind of be left out in the cold. And so what's nice about AI now is you can take a lot of your content and use UDL practices, Universal Design for Learning, at the onset of when you're creating lessons to really make sure that your learners have different options and different levels, and you can attach different topics to things and different lexiles and different skills, and we'll go through some examples of that. You can also have AI pull out vocabulary or create visuals that can make content more relevant for students. So let's take a couple of looks. I put in here a link to a Microsoft Math Scholar or Math Solver. I will show you this one because it is pretty cool, but bear with me just in knowing that I am not a math teacher. And so it's not always obvious to me whether the things that it's talking about relate exactly as they should. But for example, if you type in a math problem like 7x plus 3 equals 21, and then you hit the send, you now have it solve for x. It can show you the solution steps that you can work through with your students. It can speak this out loud for you. It can create graphs. And then it does a bunch of other things like recommending videos that will teach you about it, creating quizzes about it, and this whole sidebar of examples, which is where I say I'm not sure if these are actually all the same, but somebody who is good at math can tell me that. And I see Pam put in the chat, as pedagogy experts, we should make sure that we are thinking about how to build discussion and collaboration into individualized learning. Absolutely. So that is Math Solver. And then the other ones that I want to show you for personalization, there's a Magic School UDL Choice Board creator. And has anyone used Magic School or its tools before? Yes. Couple of people. Yeah. So Magic School has a lot of tools that are really useful for teachers. It's a specifically kind of teacher focused one. And there are a lot there, but one that's absolutely useful for accessibility is this UDL choice board. So if we're thinking about ninth grade and we'll talk about, we'll just do thesis statements for persuasive essays. And you can add in more details. So I want to have different modalities and different outputs. You can also attach files or speak into it, and then you hit generate. And it's going to give you a number of different outputs that you can do to meet whatever standard it is. And with Magic School, you can also, I don't know what happened just now. It was loading and then it freaked out. Let's see. Let's edit my prompt. Okay, that didn't work, but let's try again. So as you can see, as long as it doesn't disappear on me, it creates different options for the assignments you can make for your students. And then you can put it into like a cool tech choice board format, or you can just have a printout for them. You can copy it, you can edit and add your own things. You can have it read aloud. And so this way you can start to think about what your standards are and then how you can have this at different, creating it as a different means of representation, means of engagement. And so this is really interesting. You can also put this for, you can say specifically that you want to reach English learners or that you want to reach students who are reading at a lower grade level. And so you can tailor your UDL choice boards to your specific learners. And I see from the chat, Eric, we've also been using the IEP programs. Absolutely. And we're going to talk about those later, but I would love when we get to those, if you want to share how you're using them, either in the chat or if you want to unmute, that would be awesome. So any questions on the choice board creator in Magic School? All right. And then another one that is really useful for personalization and creating things that might be able to help some of your learners move through their own unique kind of workflows is called Magic to Do by Goblin Tools. And I'll pause to see if anyone has heard of that one before, Goblin Tools Magic to Do. That one's not as known usually as our Magic School ones. Okay, I didn't see anyone who is familiar with it. Oh, yes, I see one. So Magic to Do is interesting because most of the AI tools that we've become familiar with, they really create some kind of output for you. So for example, our choice board, we put in what we wanted to create and it's going to create a choice board for us. This one is an interesting one because it doesn't quite do that. Instead, if I put in write a persuasive thesis essay, it's going to take this and I'm going to hit the plus sign and then I'm going to use the breakdown item button. And it's going to tell me the different steps that I need to do that. And so if you're using this with students, What's nice about it is that you can then have students start to recognize the different steps. So you can chunk different things and help students learn how to chunk different things about the assignments they have, which is really nice. And if a student needs even more than that, they can continue to break down the item into smaller pieces with lots of different nuances. So if you have a student who really needs small items to work on, they can keep breaking it down. If you have a student who just needs an overview of what they need to do, they can just look at an overview. And so I think this is a useful tool because it doesn't do the work for students. And a lot of the times we're worried that AI is going to take away skills and that it's going to do the work for students. This provides that kind of graphic organizer almost, or that format of scaffolding for the students instead. It also has some other features that are kind of cool. You as an educator might use it to transform your tone from non-formal to formal. You can put in emails that other people have sent to you and judge the tone. So if, for example, you think that somebody maybe was being a little rude or passive aggressive, you can put that in and it will tell you what it thinks about the tone. It has a professor button that will explain everything or anything in a really quick crash course, which can be useful for students as well. So explain, we'll say, and it will put an explanation and it will put an example for you. And if you hit on the different peppers, you can see how basic you want it to be, and you can make it at a different level. So that's nice for your students as well. If you want something that's super basic, you can make it a super basic explanation instead of one that's a little bit harder, and you can kind of adjust and have students adjust accordingly. All right, so that is Goblin Tools. Any questions about Goblin Tools?
I noticed that it gives you like the lines. It's not gonna give you any like resources, right, or videos. It just gives you like a bulleted list of to do.
Not yet, though honestly, everything in terms of AI has changed a lot already. So I have a feeling it probably will pretty shortly start to include resources as well. But with that being said, if you want something for students where it's also going to have resources, you could take something you got from those steps and then use an AI to, and I can show you since I have ChatGPT or any AI pulled up. I actually, for this one, I'm going to use something called Perplexity just because I like that it comes with sources. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of Perplexity, but Perplexity, if I say, for example, on my Goblin Tools, let's go back to my Magic To Do, and I want to say this. Oops. So we have this persuasive essay on, we'll say, school uniforms, and reflect on topics that have captured your interest in conversations. I can say, please provide resource links and free websites that can support me as and then actually I'll put this here. Reflect on topics. Okay, and so now because this is generative AI, it is going to write some things for me, but it's also going to provide links to different resources that the students can use. And so that is something that I do like about Perplexity. And so if you click up here into the sources, you can open up all the different sources that it gives you to see whether they're reliable sources, whether you want to use them. You can also put in there things like, please only provide academic sources, things like that. And I see in the chat, I do like Perplexity and Copilot and ChatGPT can be prompted. Yes, definitely. ChatGPT, it definitely can be what you said. But the other thing with that I like is just that it comes up immediately with your sources right here. And then you can also search images, videos, and it gives you all of these other related topics. So either way, like I said, there are lots of AI tools that do lots of similar things. But it is worth checking out some of that. And until you have something that you want in each of the tools, you can always use one tool and then move into another tool. So there's that. And the other one that I wanted to show you for just adjusting to personalize for your students is Quizzes. And Quizzes has an AI generator, and it gives you lots of options. You can take a document and it will generate questions to form study materials. You can link to a website and it will allow you to create a quiz based on a website. And this new one is a YouTube video. So that one is in beta. But the one that you can also do here is you can put in a prompt like, and you can select standards. And you select a number of questions. You can select a grade. And then you can do depth of knowledge. So we'll do recall. And from here, you can pick subtopics. We'll just pick a couple. And then we're going to generate our quiz.
You think if you gave it the specific standard, would it also work?
Yes, yeah, it will. Yeah, very nice.
Right.
And once you're in here, you can do the editor, and the editor will allow you now to adjust certain things. So with AI, you can convert by reducing the options. So if you have a learner who needs to have fewer choices, you can replace it with a similar question. Something that can be useful for students who tend to like disengage unless it's really relevant is converting to real world scenarios. Or you can add answer explanations. You can translate to different languages within here. And of course, you can add your own questions. You can take away questions. So this is a kind of an easy platform that you can use AI to generate your assessments. With all of these, though, being said, of course, it's really important, just like we would with any video we'd show in class, to look over and make sure that we are giving the best assessments possible or the best information possible, because AI does pull from lots of different data. And so we want to make sure that we are giving things to our students that are reliable and accurate. Yeah, so I see a couple of things in the chat. Thank you everyone for sharing specific standards, absolutely. And so those are some tools for personalization. And I did kind of show you on Perplexity a little bit about how you can take something from one AI and use it in another AI. And this other thing that I want to just show you is kind of one thing that you can do with pretty much any AI that you are using, whether it's Copilot or Perplexity or ChatGPT, which is just if you have something that you want to adjust. So for example, we'll just say that same thing of explain quantum mechanics in 5 sentences with really difficult jargon. And of course, you wouldn't have this, but for example, to some of our students, this might be what it feels like when we are teaching them something in class. So now we have this really hard paragraph. We can then say to ChatGPT or whatever our AI is, explain this at a 3rd grade Lexile level and put in student-friendly vocabulary, pull out vocabulary, and define. So now within just a few seconds, we've created a much more student-friendly and vocabulary-focused thing for our students that might need that extra. I see a question in the chat. Let's see. Okay. An issue I've come across is that you have to tell whatever model I'm using the California Common Core standards, then it asks me to link whatever standards it claims I'm using and explain to me how I'm addressing. It's a few extra steps, but it's easier when I'm trying to hone something. Eduardo, would you mind just unmuting and sharing a little bit more about your experience with that? I'm not hearing you. I don't know if anyone, yeah, nobody else is
now.
either.
There we go.
Perfect.
Sorry. I was just gonna say I use Copilot just because most schools pay for the Microsoft Suite, so it's free for us. And Copilot uses the ChatGPT 4.0 model. Yeah, when I'm using AI or Copilot ChatGPT or whatever, what I find is I normally have like little scripts that I have written out, like use California state standards and link me that standard. Also explain how you're using that standard. And then I start telling it all the things that I want it to do in just a very quick kind of way. And then it's able to spit something out. And then from there, unfortunately, you always have to go and follow the links that it provides you, because like when I'm writing, I'm a mod severe teacher, and I'm writing these goals, and I need to link a goal that may sound more appropriate for a kindergartner, but for a 10th grader, I have to find something that lines up in the 10th grade standard. So that's a fight that I have with it, trying to say, find me a standard that's in 10th grade that somewhat is close to this. And then sometimes it'll link you to abstract websites, but then I have to tell it, no, link me to the PDF that is the Common Core state standard and what section I need to find it. And it helps being able to get to very specific places and check what you need to do without having to sift through stuff by hand like we had to just a year and a half ago.
Thank you for sharing. And that's an absolutely great tip for people, having kind of templates of certain things that you're constantly going to be asking it to do, because it really is all about whatever you're prompting the AI. And so depending on what you're prompting, you're going to get things that are really specific to what you need or things that don't really work for what you need. And you can continue kind of prompting to get there. But if you find something that works, it is really worthwhile to write that down. And yeah, depending on which AI you're using, some let you actually physically upload standards. Some will send back to you what it thinks the standards are, and you can check that. So there is a lot still that we're working on and getting used to, but I really like that suggestion of just having those prompts that will get you exactly what you're looking for once you find it.
I did want to add something too.
Yes,
something else that I do that I think is very, very helpful that people don't know is that you could train the AI model to do things the way you want it to do. So it's always a good idea to have something already made that you really like, that follows a rhyme, reason, something that you really, really like, and you throw it into it and say, this is what I want. This is what I need this to look like. However, I don't want to talk about the Roman Empire. I need this to be a math lesson about something else, but I wanted to follow this structure. I needed to have this type of language, and these are the things that I've created for him, blah, 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 blah. But you can train your own models. The problem is that a lot of it doesn't have great memory. So it's good to have like a Notion file or some type of doc somewhere with all the stuff that you're used to training it with.
Yeah, I want to add something to that. No, you're right, man, because like also you have to and sometimes it takes several prompts. You have to kind of have a conversation with it. Like, oh, this, and then do you understand? Yes, do you want me to do this? Okay, now I want you to add this modifier to what I'm about to tell you. And you add the other one. Do you get it? Okay, give me an example. And it'll give you an example. It's like it's a tit for tat.
It's a dance, it's a conversation.
Dance. Yeah.
Absolutely. These are really great tips. And before we end today, I will share something that I didn't have in this presentation, but Pam and I have created a prompt guide that are just some suggestions for how to get good quality prompts. Things like avoiding jibber jabber, where it gives you too much information that you don't need, gets right to the point. So we'll share that for you. And these are really great points as well. And it is a bit of a dance, and the more you kind of just get used to using it and finding out what you like, but also providing examples and things like that, it will help enormously. So I love these tips, and anyone else who has some, please feel free to share. You know, all of the PowerPoint slides are here, even if we don't make it through all of them. But I think that some of these tips on using AI to meet your learners' needs are really important. So with that being said, I did also see that Pam shared some things in the chat about making your own bots in Gemini. So Magic School lets you create bots, and we're going to talk about one other called PlayLab, where you can create bots. But does anyone have the answer for Pam about Gemini? I'm not sure about that answer. All right, well, let's dive back in. Pam's on a mission to learn. So the question was about whether Gemini allows you to make your own bots. So I'll leave that question up for a second. If anyone knows the answer, they can put that in the chat. And we're going to move on to some assistive technology AI. So one of the really cool things is how AI and just assistive technologies in general have been changing so much as assistive technology is becoming more advanced. So AI-powered assistive technologies can help students to access and comprehend educational materials. And some of the ones that you may be familiar with are things like OCR, also voice recognition and eye tracking. For example, if you are familiar with the iOS 18 that's coming out, it has eye tracking for everyone so that users can control the iPad using your eyes, which otherwise is a really expensive thing to get eye tracking software. There are lots of speech to text and voice recognitions out there. I was just at an AT meeting this afternoon, and there are AIs coming out that you can train to recognize things that you constantly say, and you can say it in your voice, and then it makes it so that it speaks it more clearly for individuals who have trouble speaking, but they still are able to express themselves through the programs. And I put some examples here that you can look into. If we have time towards the end, I will preview Seeing AI, which is a really awesome app for people who are low vision, and also Hand Talk, which is a really nice sign language app. But we'll see if we have time, because I would have to switch my screen over. But before we move on, does anyone have any assistive technology AIs that they're using frequently with their students that they like a lot? Okay. All right, so we'll hopefully get to preview Hand Talk and Seeing AI, but let's move into how you can use AI for translation. And so there are a lot of things out there. One, 11 Labs is able to take a video that you've created in your native language of instruction, and it can transfer that into any type of language, and it sounds like your voice, but you are now speaking in a different language. Our colleague uses that a lot. And then, of course, now there are some really good translators, transcribers, and things that you can use to adapt content to be more culturally appropriate. So I put in here just some basic ones, Google Translate, Duolingo. But one thing that I do want to show you that, and I heard from some people that they have Microsoft, which is great, because Microsoft and accessibility in general, they work much more nicely together than Google and accessibility from a content standpoint. So one thing that you may not be familiar with is the fact that while in Google you can do live captioning, you can do live captioning with a subtitle in a different language within Microsoft, which is really nice. So if you go into the slideshow button on a presentation and you go into always use subtitles and subtitles settings, you can then turn on your spoken language, for me, English, and then I can turn on my subtitle language, which just for this, I selected Spanish. And then once I start my slideshow, and hopefully I can pull this over. I don't think that you're all seeing my screen, so hold on one second. Let me share my other screen real quick. Let's see if this works.
That's pretty cool, but we use these during our PTO meetings, like coffee with the community and stuff. We have this like the subtitles going as the person is talking.
Yeah, it's really, really awesome. And I'm just switching my desktop over right now so that you can see the one that is doing it. So I think, yeah, now you can see that as we're talking, it is captioning for me, but instead of the captions being in English, the captions or the transcription is now in Spanish. And so it has multiple languages, and this is a really nice opportunity that AI has created for us to translate as we teach. And I'm going to go back to my other screen really quickly.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Do you know if there's one that could be, because we're gonna have a boyhood empowerment thing on Saturday, and they have a student that speaks Punjabi. So I wonder, like, if it'd be something not to text but to voice. Do you know what I mean? Like, because so he's a little one, so I don't think he can read as well. I wonder if there could be something out there that
I would check ElevenLabs.
okay.
I'm not positive of what they have, but ElevenLabs does have a lot of languages, and with that, it does translate you speaking to another language with your tone and your lips moving and things like that. So I think that would be a good one to check. And if you you could even try using AI to say, like, find another tool besides ElevenLabs that would do this. And I think they would probably give you a list of ones that might work for you. But ElevenLabs would be the first one that came to my mind.
I think that one, I think, because that one you record yourself and you send it, right? And then after, yeah, because I'm looking for one that's gonna be like on the spot.
Yeah, that one should work for you.
Oh, all right, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions about translation? I see in the chat. Oh yeah, another suggestion, if you have ChatGPT on your phone, you might be able to use the speaking feature to have it translate what you're saying. It will do it pretty simultaneously. That's another great option. And not sure they have specific language, but Microsoft Translate integrates with slides. Yep, and also just on the speaker and receiver devices. Cool. Yes, so Roxanne, you can translate slides, and we just previewed it in PowerPoint. You go to slides and then you do subtitles and you adjust the languages. All right, so let's move into chatbots. And we already have had some talks about chatbots, but chatbots can be your students' tutors. They can be sources of information, like that little library on their shoulder, and they can provide instant and personalized support to students. And so some of the ones that we've seen in Magic School, they have an AI resource bot. And this part's kind of nice. In addition to Magic School for Teachers, which has all of the different features that teachers might use that are pretty cool to play around with, it also has Magic School Student. And so with that, there are custom chatbots. So you can build a chatbot from scratch to interact with. You could also have your students build chatbots. They can also use Raina, the AI chatbot for students. And then you can create a custom chatbot for students based on your own instructions. And so that's a really nice one that Pam and I have used, where we only want to share certain information, or we want things to be conveyed in specific ways. And so you can do that within Magic School. And the other one that we've used a lot in our teaching at the Linda Vista Innovation Center is one called Play Labs. With this, you can have, basically, you can create your own chatbot, and you can add research and articles and instructions on how you want the students to interact with the chatbot. But the thing that we've liked about this is you can tell it, for example, if a student is asking inappropriate questions, then they need to go see the teacher. It will just give them a message. This is inappropriate, go see the teacher, things like that. So you can create things like that. And within here, you can have students create chatbots and build things using the platform as well. So there are some places where you can have students creating their own chatbots, or where you can customize chatbots specifically for your students based on what you want them to get out of things. Anybody else have any chatbot creation programs or any chatbots within programs that you really like? School AI? Do you want to share anything on that one? I'm not familiar with that one. ChatGPT.
Hi, yeah, sorry. School AI, it provides a bunch of resources similar to Magic. And it also has these spaces, which a bunch of teachers have already gone and created these chatbots. So you can search up, reading comprehension for 8th grade, and this you can either embed it into Google Classroom or in real time pass it out to students, and then they will have their own chatbot interact with it. And then it also gives them feedback on how they're performing. So if they're not answering correctly, I'll say, that's not quite right, try this. And then on the teacher end, you can see in real time, it's giving us feedback. So it says, this student might be struggling with reading comprehension in these couple of areas. So that feedback's really nice and saves a lot of time.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that one. And that sounds a little bit also like the Conmigo, where it gives you that data and feedback. So good to know. Lots of good things out there. And then I put in here automation, grading, and feedback. And within here, there are lots of things, and we'll talk more about this in the productivity for teachers session that we do. But AI can check homework. It can give targeted feedback pretty quickly. Of course, you always want to look over that and make sure that the targeted feedback is correct. It can help you with IEP goal writing, things like that, other administrative tasks that take up a lot of time. So I linked in your slides this menu of productivity tools that we created. It's just basically a list of tools that might help you with your productivity that are either free or freemium. And we kind of went through and looked at some of the common tasks that teachers might be doing. And we tried to just see, okay, it does this pretty well. With that being said, again, these programs are not necessarily allowed at your schools. So this isn't an endorsement of any specific things. This was just one that we found that did certain things that help teachers out that were either free or freemium. And I put in here a couple of links that you might be able to use for IEP and support goals. So Magic School does, because it has so many different things. It has an IEP generator and a support goals generator. With this, again, you're going to get the most out of AI if you have some blanket things and language that you want to include in there, as Eduardo said. Additionally, with this, you want to be really careful that you don't share any identifiable information for your students. You want to just use this as kind of like getting information that can support you as you create these IEP or support goals. Or if you are a classroom teacher who has students that already have IEP goals, to better understand ways to use it. But I do also want to show you EduGPT. Because this one And of course it logged me out. This one is interesting in that it has chatbots that are specific to certain learning disabilities. And so as you scroll down, it has lots of different chatbots. It has ones that help you with different programs, but it also has strategies for autism, strategies for dyslexia, ADHD, and there are more faculty chatbots, but really each of the bots, kind of like what we had shared before, that really they've taken the time to make each of these bots have a specific nuanced set of information. So when you go to one of these bots, it's going to give you resources about a specific learning disability to help you as you write your IEP or support goals. And yes, Roxanne, we will be sharing the slides. I'll have Pam share that in just a second. And I see also, sorry, my thing is blocked from, I have this little pop-up that is blocking your full message, but I've created a few using Hugging Face Platform and Stanford Accelerated Learning. However, I have not shared them with students. Is that about chatbots?
Yeah, so I actually did a whole session on it, and I used Stanford Accelerated Learning. They actually kind of created sort of like a template where you can really work with prompting and develop the chatbot. So I, developed some that I wanted to kind of test out and try, and then I also presented at a conference. The only thing is if you share, like, you have to create an account if you end up like using it more than 5 times. So I haven't been comfortable with students creating an account because it uses Hugging Face, which if you've been on there, there's a few things on there that maybe you wouldn't want them, accessing. So I've kind of just created it. I've had it on my computer, and then I've kind of gone around to groups and checked in with students. And then, okay, let's try this out, for something specific. Like I did one for JMUN, and it's an advisor, and it's actually doing a really, really good job. Like I've, retested it out, played with the prompting, made sure it will not write a paper for a student, but it will, assist. So that was kind of a lot of like trial and error, but that's what I kind of used it for.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. All right. I think what I'm going to do at the end of this, when I share the prompts guide, I'm also just going to create a Google Doc. If anyone wants to update the Google Doc with just like really good tools that they have worked with, I feel like there were so many good pieces of information from this session that other people shared. So I'll just make a Google Doc, and don't feel obligated, but if you want to share any of your resources or your strategies, it seems like we have some really advanced AI users here that could help other people out. So I'll add that at the end. I'll put it, I think I'll put a link to it in the slideshow and then on the page that on our EdTech schedule, so that we can catch up with that. So the last thing that I thought might be useful for AI for you is using AI to make your content more accessible for your students in general. So we talked a little bit about transcription, audio descriptions. Now, when you have an image, generally there is a recommended alt text that will come up. So that's something that over time AI has looked at the different images and can create its own alt text, subtitles, simulations, virtual reality experiences. And then, of course, things like accessibility checkers that are getting better and better all the time. And so with that, before we move into the considerations, I am just going to pull over, as I mentioned, PowerPoint is, or any of the 365 have really great accessibility checkers. So you can go to review and then check accessibility. And here it will look through your entire PowerPoint or your Word document, whatever you have, and it will tell you all the things you need to improve. So for example, I have missing alternative text, and it will point out which things are missing. It will tell me if I'm missing table headers. It'll tell me to check the reading order, and so I can make sure that if a screen reader is reading it, it would read it correctly. It will recognize things like duplicate slide titles. It recognizes contrast. You can inspect it without colors so that it doesn't look at the contrast and things like that. But overall, this is a really helpful way to use its monitoring to help you make your content more accessible.
This
All
sounds
right.
really interesting. What was the name again? I'm sorry.
So it's the accessibility checker within any of the Microsoft products. So it Word, PowerPoint. I do believe they have it also. I know they have it in OneNote. They have it in some of the others. I'm not sure if they have it in I don't think they have it in Forms, and I don't think they have it in Sheets yet, but really mostly you would use it for your Word documents and your PowerPoints. And then especially if you use it for those, then if you export as PDFs, then your PDFs are more accessible to begin with too. So those are just some suggestions for making your content more accessible. And we are almost at time. So just a couple of things we've already talked about, just the idea of as you're using AI, making sure that you are protecting your students' information. And a couple of other things that are just interesting to think about, that AI as a whole tends to, because it picks up from lots of bodies of information, it sometimes stereotypes and creates things that maybe are not necessarily going to meet the needs of your learners immediately. It can give you suggestions, but really you know your learners and you know whether they fit certain criteria or whether they're, different from other learners who might have the same thing. And so just be careful as you're using these tools to create IEP goals and things like that, to remember that you know your student best. And with that, you can make the best recommendations in the long run. But it can help you to find the resources you might need to look for. And it also doesn't tend to have a lot of information on specific disability groups. So that's just something also to keep in mind if you're using it for data. While it collects really good data about your students sometimes, as a data set, sometimes it doesn't include information about specific disabilities as well as we would expect that it does, at least not yet. All right, well, we have about a minute, and if anyone has anything they want to share, again, I thank you all so much for contributing. And I'm gonna just turn off my screen share and share that prompt guide, and I'll share a link to a Google Doc so that we can go ahead and just, if anyone wants to share resources, they can do that. And I will stop recording and give you all time to ask questions if you have any.